You are listening to Sustainable Success with Chris Salem.
Well, we got a great show for you today, and we're going to be talking from startup to industry leader. You're going to be hearing from someone that has been around the block. He's not done this once, he's done it a few times or several times, and he's going to talk about the journey. He's going to talk about the process. So no matter where you are, if you're a startup or just been in business a few years, it's time to dream big. It's time to look at the bigger picture, the impact that you want to create. And we got the right person here. And before I bring him on, his name is Rich Kahn. Rich is the CEO of Anura, has spent over 30 years in digital marketing, building 5 multi-million-dollar companies. And he'll cover that here today, including one featured on CNN and the Inc. 5000 list for 5 consecutive years. His mission, to stop ad fraud. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that here today too, because that is a big issue that a lot of times people don't take for granted. And this is something that could be holding you back. So to stop fraud before it drains budgets, Rich is going to share insights there. And in the past year alone, Anura exposed $1.2 billion in fraudulent activity for its users. So amazing what the great things that Anura, headed by their founder and CEO, Rich Kahn, and we'd like to formally introduce Rich Kahn to the show. Rich, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on today, guys.
We are so happy to have you here. And so, Rich, as we do always on this show, before we get into the topic and kind of the journey, talk a little bit about, what got you into, starting up, being a startup and became an industry leader. Like, what took you down that path to say, I'm going to start my own company and I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to take it to the next level?
Well, my journey wasn't starting off to do that initially. My journey started when I was 9. I wrote my first game when I was 9. I got published in Compute Gazette when I was 12. I just had an affinity for computing and programming. And back then there wasn't the internet, right? There was something called the ARPANET where you can dial into bulletin board systems. You have those little crazy,
Yes,
plug yourself.
I remember those days. We're the same age, about probably.
Yeah. So remember I was saying, you say plug your phone in. Well, people don't have landlines anymore. So you couldn't even do it. But that's where I got my taste for doing stuff like that. And I always knew I wanted to have my own business. So I can just, the joys of having your own business, or you don't realize about the things that, hurt having your own business. But so I started there and I just did stuff that I found interesting and unique. So each one of the businesses that I built, they were built to make profit and pay bills, but they were built because there was something different or something unique about it. So each one of the businesses that I created was something just so different. Like I know people who go out and build companies and they don't create anything. They just license software from here and they sell it and they process it and and they make money, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's all about making money. But I always wanted to do something. Make money obviously is part of that journey.
Yes.
But at the same token, I want to do something that excited me when I wake up in the morning of looking forward.
You want to keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this journey of fraud detection has taken a long turn. Like I said, if you just look at the internet side of my entrepreneurship, it started in 1993. That might be older than some of your audience.
Yeah. Well, I was 26 years old in 1993. I'm going to be 58 in July, so I can remember those years.
So yeah, you got a few years on me, but
Yeah.
So it started then, and my first business, like I said, it was never to make money. It was always about doing something really cool. Money was the second object. So for me, originally, I wanted to start an online newsletter, or back then they used to call them e-zines, and just talk about what the internet was changing, because there was no point and click. There was no graphical browser. There was none of that. It was all command line. So you really were more of the techie side of the world when you first started. So for me, I was just started writing about like, this is coming out, that's coming out. Here's a new library of where you can see, these type of photos. Like, here's how you get to different locations. And within 6 months, I had 20,000 opt-in users into this newsletter. And somebody turned around and said, "Hey, can I pay to advertise in your newsletter?" And that's like, sure. That I wasn't in the intent, and it just kind of happened. And that's kind of like each one of the businesses that I started had something cool, unique, or different, but it always came back to, I want to do this full time. I don't want to have to work a full time job and come home and do something that I love. I want to be able to do it, roll it up into one, be efficient. So it's kind of happened over the years with the different businesses. But fraud detection, which doesn't sound like interesting and cool, it's from a programming standpoint, it's really interesting because it's I hate to say it, but it's the cat and mouse game. Like, who's going to outthink who?
Yeah.
You know? And who can come up with a better tool, or who can come up with a better mousetrap? Like, there's just it, it's it, it's kind of fun. Like, I look forward to it. Like, I got one. I
Yeah,
got
it sounds like you're like an online detective.
Yeah, it's well, it takes the hacker from you because now you're hacking the hacker's code.
Yeah.
And so you have to think like a hacker in order to figure out what are they trying to do to get around your code, and then build something to do it. And then are they getting around it? Like, there's a lot of like stuff. There's days where it gets frustrating where like you're like, oh, this is going to take a while to figure out.
Yeah.
You go home, get a fresh set of eyes, come back. Oh, this is how I'm going to do it. And then you solve the problem. But it's just it was always about solving a problem first, and then the money would come second.
Yeah. Wow. And I love the fact what you just said. The money would come second because the value that you were giving, you kind of, you got into this business, you kind of stumbled into what was, but now, didn't really know at the time, but maybe on some level, hey, there's a challenge here. There's a challenge that as the technology evolves, this could be an ongoing problem. And if I can kind of get on top of this now, hey, I can be in the forefront of something really important because I'm sure I'm because you're more of an expert in this than I would ever be. But obviously, fraud can disrupt businesses. It can disrupt revenue. It can disrupt profit, and all those are things that you got to be able to be on top of, especially if you're in the online world of generating your business and generating revenue from it.
Well, yeah, just there's a perfect example in what you just said, that fraud can disrupt business.
Yeah,
So I always tell people, like when we're having a conversation, what percentage of fraud would shut your business down?
yeah,
And that takes them back for a second because, like, what do you mean? Fraud can shut my business down. Like, okay, your company lives on advertising. Most companies live on advertising. Like, most companies don't have enough word of mouth or referral business to sustain themselves as a business, right? So they rely on content marketing, they
yep,
rely on paid marketing. Let's face it, was it I think last year was 640 billion dollars was spent on digital marketing. So lots of companies are spending money on digital marketing to survive. But let's say you had 10% fraud, right? And you're like, okay, it's hurting my ROI a little bit, not the end of the world. I'm still getting leads, things. Okay, what about 20, 30, 40? What number does that become inefficient and then start to slow the business growth or kill the business?
yep,
There is a number for everybody, right? Let's take it one step. Let's say you're um an ad agency, and your
yep,
job is to sell advertising. So you're selling advertising to your clients. What percentage of fraud do your clients stop buying from you and
yeah,
literally shut you down? So like that's the kind of like stuff that it can do. And just to put a number on it, $640 billion was spent on digital marketing. And by our estimates, $140 billion was stolen by fraudsters.
wow,
I think that represents about 22%.
yeah.
Um, so, what percent, when does it get to a point when that number, that percentage of fraud continues to grow? So how much longer is it going to grow before the system collapse? Like, what number,
Exactly.
if 80% of the digital marketing spend was fraud, would the market still exist? Probably not. But what number is it going to shut it down? So people got to get ahead of this now. Like, if you really want to sustain your business model and paid marketing is part of what you do, you really got to get ahead of it.
Well, like you said, it's got to be part of your strategy. It's not something like, well, when it happens, we'll deal with it. No, it's got to be something even before you. Hopefully, it'll never happen, but you have the right systems and processes in place that when if it does, you could catch it right in the beginning, not like now in the back end where, like you said, it might be too late, or maybe,
Well,
or it because like you said, first perception is last perception. Somebody feels like their information's compromised in some way, they're like, hey, I'm never going back there again. That
let's
type.
dispel that one myth of when it happens.
Yeah,
It's happening.
it's
It's
happening.
not a
There you go.
question.
When it happened, it's probably happened. Yeah, you don't even know it.
I can from all the clients that I scale, because what we do is like when client comes to us, they're not sure if they have fraud, right? So we do a free trial so we can scan and find out exactly what percentage of fraud, prove to them where the fraud's coming from, and their back end numbers start to back things up, and that's kind of our process, right? But my biggest question, I do a lot of talks around the country, and essentially it's no longer if you have a fraud problem, it's a question of how much fraud you're dealing with. Everybody's got. I haven't scanned anybody with zero fraud ever.
Wow.
And I've personally scanned thousands of clients.
Yeah.
So like when we started the company, we started actually probably a few weeks before your show started. We started April 1st of
Wow.
2017 with this
And
product.
I think and I hope you emphasize the importance of doing that assessment on a regular basis. Doesn't mean it has to be every week or anything like that, but definitely on a more frequent basis to detect if the level is going down or, God forbid, if it's going up.
Well, I mean, when our clients sign up with our service, they have monitoring in real time.
Oh, so they can see it real time.
So
Got it.
they can see it. So they make a change. They can see if it helped or hurt. If they made some additional changes, or if they're just sitting there, I had this happen, and it yielded a link for a new feature. But a client was sitting humming along at 5%. They had used our tools and everything else, and they're keeping it because it's a firewall. It's a visitor firewall, protects them in case something happens. And they're sitting back, everything's looking good, and all of a sudden, boom, they get a spike. And our CSM team picked up on it, said, "Hey, you went from 5% to 25% overnight. What changed?" And now they're scrambling, trying to figure out where it came from. So of course we can drill into the dashboard and figure out exactly where it came from. So now they can go question that source of traffic and figure out what's going on. But if they didn't have our tool, they would have had no clue.
They would have no clue. Like you said, they would always be on the react side of everything and trying to, yeah, and that's always a vulnerable place to be.
And it's kind of like we always say that we're in the cybersecurity space. Like we're a subset of cybersecurity because we're protecting that side of the business.
Yeah.
Like I talk to people because I have a cousin who owns a cybersecurity company. And so the big question is, when should you have cybersecurity? Always. Cybersecurity
Now.
you should always have it. Why? Because once you've been breached, it's too late, right? It's already the damage is done. So you should always, same with us. When should you have fraud detection? You should always have fraud detection because once it spikes, it's too late. But 9 times out of 10, people that we talk to, there's enough fraud there, it becomes an issue. So like I said, and I know I bounce around a lot, just how I think.
No, no, please do. It's fine.
One of the I just got asked this question. We were just at a trade show in Phoenix, Arizona, and the question came up like, who benefits from fraud? Like, who's the fraud? Like, I want to know who the person is. Like, I want to know, is it my neighbor next door that's committing fraud, or who is it? I'm like, it's from more than 20 years of studying fraud full time, looking at it, analyzing it, detecting it, identifying exactly where it's coming from. I feel very comfortable saying that majority of fraud comes from organized crime.
Mm,
So, having some fun with that, do you like supporting organized crime?
yeah.
And most people are going to say, "Oh, I should say everybody would say no," but yet you still do.
Yeah. And
So
organized crime is everywhere. Like you said, it's not just like the typical, oh, it's the mafia, Italian mafia or the Russian mafia. There's always organized crime in a lot of areas. Europe, Asia, Middle East, you name it.
we actually caught a huge one from Chinese mafia, and I had Secret Service in my office. We were analyzing data, going through all kinds of stuff, and we were going to wipe the account because we had seen how much money they had taken from the system and everything else. And his recommendation was, don't touch the money.
Yeah.
He said, this is organized crime. They don't like to be stolen from. Don't touch the money. So we played
They
nice.
like to take it, but they don't want to be taken. Yeah.
We shut the account off. We walked away from it, but we left the money alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's just better, to just cut your losses where that's at and move forward. Trying to trace it and find out, it's probably a very difficult thing to do
Yeah.
there. And it could be quite expensive too with, when you get lawyers involved and so on. Well, share with us because I know we have about 2.5 minutes. We have about 2 minutes now until the break, but I want to know we're going to go into more length here in the second segment. But anything else that you want to elaborate on before we go to break here about the importance of no matter what size business you are, whether you're a startup or, just been in business a few years, or you've been around for 10 years or more, why this has got to be, part of your strategy right from the get-go, no matter what level of online you're doing.
Well, at the end of the day, you're trying to grow a business and you're trying to make decisions based on data. Like most businesses make decisions based on data. They look at the data, they make a decision. But if you're looking at skewed data, you're making a good decision based on bad data, you get a bad result. So even if you're not defending yourself in real time against fraud, you're still making decisions based on what that data shows. And again, if you want to build your business and grow your business, you really have to do it based on clean data. And like I said, if you're not protecting yourself against it, you're being beaten up by it. So you really got to focus on doing something with it today, now, if you're not already doing something.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, data is going to be really, I mean, data's always been important, but it just continues to get even more important in what we do around it to grow our businesses. And if that data has been compromised in any way, I mean, that can really throw your business off, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Wow, powerful stuff here, and I know you got a little more to share. And if you could just kind of, just for the listeners, sum up just what you had shared here in the first segment about, the importance of adopting an ad fraud strategy or partner in the case of your company, and how this is going to help them and protect them to move, to continue to do what they're doing and move their business forward.
Let's put it this way. Fraud's a big thing. It's affecting everybody. Like I said, it's no longer a question of if you have fraud, it's a question of how much fraud you're dealing with. And you need to have some type of ad fraud strategy, whether you're doing something internal. In today's day and age with AI, it's going to be more cost effective to purchase a solution like a licensed solution than to build it yourself. But it really has to be part of your tech stack as far as what you're doing to build your company. So if you're not
Yeah,
doing it yet, this is something to get on now.
absolutely. So, Rich, if you could share with us in this segment, you've been doing this for over 30 years now, and you've had 5 successful businesses. Talk a little bit about the journey from the startup to, where let's just say it was one of your former companies that you took it from a startup to an exit, and every step of the way. And what were some of the things, were some of the common challenges? What were some of the things that where you overcame those challenges to turn it into an opportunity and then to a result? And what would you now do differently, or maybe you already did it with Anura, what you learned from previous ventures that you did differently?
All right. I'm going to give you two examples. So I'll give you the dot-com dream that never happened. And I'll give you another one. So, all right. One of my first businesses was a company where we paid people to surf the web. So you download an application, it would pop up on your on your desktop, and it would rotate through banners every couple of minutes, and we generated revenue from that, which we shared with the end user. And we did it in a multi-level marketing fashion, so that like if you referred somebody, you got credit for what they were doing, and we had people making a couple $1,000 a month running this application on their desktop. So I mean, it was pretty exciting. In fact, what was interesting, I looked back and I just saw the stat the other day, and I did a little research on mine. We got to 1 million subscribers faster than Netflix got to their first 1 million subscribers. They're a much bigger company. Don't just I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
number
yeah, yeah.
wise, right? It was kind of cool to see that stat. So I was probably 28 years old when I started this company. We started it in December of 1999, launched it, and it was one of these companies where me and a buddy of mine were putting this together, just having some fun. Say, hey, can we make this happen? We'll make a few bucks. And so the first day we launched, we're waiting for people to start signing up. We did a little bit of a newsletter announcement for people that we knew just to get the ball rolling. And we had 5 or 6 signups, 7 signups, 8 signups. And then something happened like after launch. All of a sudden they started rattling up, rattling up. Next thing you know, long story short, at the end of the day, first day we had over 500 signups on the first day. And that was December of 99. January of 2000. So the very first full month we're in business, we ended up doing $130,000 in business with 30,000 in expenses. I'm like, oh wow, this internet thing's real easy. So, um, And again, just to keep the story short, we end up having a company that was doing consulting work, and they were trying to go public because it was the dot-com bubble craze. Like everyone's going crazy with the dot-com, but again, in order to go public, you had to have something real sexy, like some type of sexy business model. And this company chose us as that model. So February rolls around. So now we're in business 2.5 months, and we get an offer on the table for 60 million bucks.
Wow.
Well, I'm like, this is too easy, right? I'll do this 10 times over. And long story short, we had to get all the lawyers involved. We had to get the accountants involved because we're talking a lot of money, and you want to make sure
Yeah.
everything's set up right. And we had it. Everything was finally slated to close April 28th of 2000, and April 14th, the dot-com bubble burst. And the
Oh
IPO came off
God.
the table. So like that was a 3 month. I mean, could you imagine if I sold that a 3 month old company for $60 million? Would have been awesome. I have
Would
28
have
years.
been awesome, and had you done it like yeah, before that happened. It's almost like if you were when you owned real estate, prior to the financial collapse in 2008. You would have made out like a bandit, right? And then all of a sudden you saw your everything just
I missed
plummet.
it by 2 weeks.
Oh my
So that's an
God.
example of a failure. So then let's take one of my other companies. I had another company that was a marketing an ad network. Think of a small Google, text-based ads,
Yep,
bid
yep.
placement, right?
By the way, I remember the ad network era. I remember how ad networks were, and I used to belong to one. I was on the board called Martini Media back then. I remember that they were an ad network. I
Yeah.
remember them. Yeah,
So they were very big back in the day,
yeah,
and we had launched a company in 2003, and I believe it was 2014 we went to go and sell it. We hired an M&A bank. So I've hired an M&A bank 3 times so far. Unfortunately, no successful outcomes. But with this company, I learned a lot. So we basically built this company, got it off the ground. You know, um, I earned the Ernst& Young Entrepreneur of the Year for technology based on the technology I had built in it. This was the company that we're on the Inc. 5000 list 5 years in a row. So company's growing, everything's going great. Let's strike while the iron's hot. Let's sell the company. So we hired the M&A bank. They come in, they do the due diligence. They get me in front of probably 12 different companies. Um, and so Yahoo, Facebook, Google, like all the big boys, and half a dozen other companies. And we get on the phone and they're like, you know what? We don't care about your ad network. It's been there, it's been done. It's not big enough for us to consider it. But the fraud detection that you built inside that business, that's interesting.
that's what they wanted. Yeah,
That's what they wanted. So they all asked the same two questions. It was like they were reading from the same script. Is it standalone? And do you have clients behind it? And I had to answer no to both of them, no matter how I objected to it. They said, once you do, call us back. So that was my idea. You know what? Let's take this technology and spin it off into its own company, which we did. So that's what we learned
yeah.
out of it.
Well, that was actually a blessing in disguise. I would say that, right? Had you. I mean, did you think you were heading down that road regardless, or just that the fact that guy said that you're like, well, geez, this guy sees a lot of value in that alone, and not the ad network concept itself, but just
Yeah, because
that.
I was naive enough to think, hey, if you want our clean traffic, because the ad networks were known to have really bad traffic,
Yeah, bad traffic, exactly.
you want to have clean traffic, you have to buy it through us. And of course, our system was filtering out 99% of the traffic we were bringing in, and only 1% was sellable. It was great traffic, but it was still a very minimal amount of traffic, so that we couldn't grow as much as we wanted to because we just didn't have the resources. We didn't have the volume of traffic that we needed.
Yeah,
So it was kind of interesting when I heard that one company after another, like so 6 or 7 companies all said the same thing. That's when I got off the phone. It's like, okay, as much as I don't want to build another platform, I think we need to build another platform. And that's when we decided to take the technology from its current state, roll it into a self-sustaining business model, and then when everything was all said and done, April 1st of 2017, we launched it as a standalone product.
wow,
And now we've been building it and growing it, and of course now everybody's hounding us, hey, are you interested in selling? And it's like, just focus on growth right now, focusing on growth.
yeah.
If you focus on the growth, the money will come.
Exactly. The time will come when you'll know when it's ready for exit, and so on. So now, and what you just shared, can you look back and say to yourself, hey, when I started my first company and then the second company and then this company, that you took something you learned from each of them. Either you did something different or you did something what you learned, maybe, but just adapted it maybe in a different way. Anything like that you could share
Well,
that would be helpful?
yeah, one of the first things that I learned, and it was over the course of a couple of the companies, um, and I hate to say it, but this is how it worked out for me is don't hire, when you go into business, don't hire your friends.
Oh, please expand on that. That is something that I've advocated as a business consultant for businesses for years. Please share that because that is so important.
So it's great because you're like, okay, I know this person, I trust this person, it's going to be awesome to work together. It's one thing if you're business partners, right?
Yeah.
That's a different situation. But when you're hiring is what I've noticed is the key. Because I had a friend that I decided to hire into a business, and I said, look, we're friends. I don't want business to interrupt that, and we shook hands, and he said, look, the day this becomes an issue between our friendship, I'm walking. I'm like, okay, we're in good shape. Let's do that. And maybe it was 10 years down the road, 8 to 10 years down the road, it became an issue, and he was my best friend. And it got to a point where I had to be the boss and make a decision because he was hurting the business.
Yeah.
It's one thing if he's not helping growing it, but when you're hurting the business and causing it to not grow, causing it to
Yes. Yes.
fail, I got to make the decision. So I made the decision, and he was all upset, pissed off, and he goes, "I don't understand what happened." I said, "Well, remember that day we shook hands way back
Yeah.
when, 10 years ago? You never left. It's
Hmm.
been a problem in our friendship for the last 6 months or a year, and you're still here. You never left. So you pushed me into a situation where I had no choice but to make this decision." And we ended up parting ways as friends and colleagues. You know,
Yeah, it does. And would you say like unless it's a family business, like a family office, something like that, but yeah, like being careful with family members probably as well.
family members, the same thing. I'll give you a
Yeah.
perfect example. In our last network, the ad network that we were running, my wife and I built a company, and she hired her mother, and her mother was her assistant. And the mother couldn't get out of her head that she wasn't the boss of her daughter, that the daughter was the boss of her.
Yes.
And that created for a lot of fun, interesting fight. Like, 'cause in other words, we might go home, have dinner together. Oh my God, this employee did such and such. This is ridiculous. And
Yeah.
you just need to vent sometimes, right? You're the
Yes.
business owner, you just want to vent, just like I'm sure employees go home and they vent about their bosses.
Oh,
Like
of course.
you know what, but you would never go face to face and say those things like, they shouldn't have done this, they blah, blah, blah. Well, the mother took it upon herself to go and have that conversation with the employee as if it was coming from Beth, my wife
Oh
herself.
my God.
So, but again, in this bit, like I said, the family is different. Like, and it depends on the family. Like, family dynamics are different. Like in this business that I have now, my son works for me. He's my CTO. My brother-in-law works for me. He's head of my client success management team. My daughter-in-law works for me. She's on the marketing side. So we have a lot of family in the business, and we've hired all the kids at one point or another to
Yeah,
work with
yeah.
to learn. But it's you got to set the ground rules in the beginning, and then hope that it
Yeah,
doesn't.
it's got that like what you just said. That's got to be established up front, and it's got to be specific, clear, and concise. Like kind of the example you shared with your friend that sort of kind of forgot about it along the way, but you knew when you had that conversation 10 years ago, and here you are, and you had to make a tough decision to hey, you're a friend. You'll always be a friend, but from a business perspective, I have to let you go.
Yeah, and that's tough. I've had to do that with a business partner as well.
Yeah,
Um, Situation came up without getting to a lot of craziness details, but it got to a point where this individual was doing something, um, building a competing business while my partner in the same
yeah.
office. And when I asked about it, they denied knowing about it. And
Denied and lied about it. Yeah.
once I realized they were lying about it, once I can't trust somebody, what am I going to do?
Well, hey, when trust takes a long time to build and earn. and it just takes a second or two, even that, just to lose it, when that happens. So yeah, it's never easy with that. And you've made some really, really valid points here. So the thing is, you can't get, and you can be friendly with people, but you can never get too close where now, again, you're putting the friendship before the business. Sometimes you got to, it's like church and state. You have to separate it.
Yeah. If it's one thing to become friendly with your staff, right?
Yes.
That's expected. You want to build a good team,
Yeah, you want to build rapport and trust with your
yeah, you
team.
have to build that. But unfortunately, you're always, in that situation, you're always going to be the boss. And it's tough when, when the boss has to play the boss card and say, hey, this is, you didn't show for 2 days. Like, this is not how we work here. You need to be here, or you need to take, submit time off or whatever.
Yeah.
It's tough to do that. And then it's like, wait a second, I thought we were friends.
Yeah, exactly. They use the friend card. Hey, we're friends.
Yeah.
Come on. Yep, I know. You know exactly. Oh my God. Yeah, it's so true. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because that is I've seen so many people, prolong these issues and put themselves even into harder situations because they put the friendship over the business. And again, it's not like, hey, it's not personal. It's not like I don't want to be your friend anymore. I'm still your friend, but we can't keep doing what we're doing right now.
Well, here's another thing too. If you put the friend before the business because you don't want to have that conversation, then the rest of the staff looks at you as a weak leader.
Yeah.
So you have somebody on staff that's not doing the job that everybody knows about, that's goofing off, coming in late, whatever the situation is, but you're not the only one who sees it. Everybody else in the company sees it. And if you don't take action, they see you as a weak leader for not taking action.
Yeah, exactly. It sets that, again, you set a tone that, hey, I can get away with what I'm doing. If I take if I don't show up for one day, or I kind of coast through what my responsibilities are, he's not going to really come down on me because he's a nice guy. He's a nice boss, type of thing. And people take that for granted, unfortunately, sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I know as we're getting towards the end of the second segment, but anything that you see that you could share in what you shared about, again, about being careful about hiring friends or putting friends above the business. Anything else that you feel would be beneficial to those business owners, either in a startup level to already been in business for a while?
Well, I mean, I almost want to say enough said with the friend stuff, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's just, if you're going to be, if you have a really close friend, you're going to go in business together. I've done that and had it not work out, had it worked out great for years and then have it not work out.
yeah,
But that's different than, like I said, hiring. That's the big key. Like,
yeah. Hiring, yes,
because if you're partners, then yeah, you like, look, my wife and I are partners, right? We fight about things all the time, and then we come to a decision, and we've gotten a situation where we know at the end of the day, one of us gives in for that, and next we get the next one, right? So you can't always agree, or we'll bring in a third party. We'll bring in,
yeah.
somebody else to say, okay, this is what I think, this is what she thinks, pick a
Yeah,
side.
like a mediator. It doesn't mean they have to be a mediator, but they
Yeah,
act the role of a mediator.
yeah,
And
just
like, and I would safe to say, like, again, you're separating that from your marriage. It doesn't become personal. You're not blending what's in business. I know sometimes it's easy to say it and do as another, but nonetheless, if you both are on that same page, you could separate it. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
No,
that's
makes
pretty
sense.
much, yeah, when it comes to that. So I tell people, and I come across people all the time. Oh my God, I'm gonna bring in my best friend. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. And I always like, could you please not? Here's why. Learn from my mistakes. Hey, it may work out for you, right? It works out for people, right? But most people that I talk to have that same issue.
Yeah, yeah. I know I've seen it. I've seen it time and time again as either running my own businesses back in the day and then being a consultant now for the last 13 years, working with startups and companies to scale. I know exactly where you're coming from, and I've seen this a million times. So, and I'm so grateful that you brought it up because it's so important. Rich, this has been just such a magical show with so much valuable information coming from, personal experience, just great wisdom that you've shared. Let's look at, when you look back, when you were starting your businesses at the time, how did you know that you were now becoming a industry leader? And what did that feel like? And what did that do to kind of steer you towards taking the business to the next level? Like if you could give us some insights, that way it helps business owners here that when they arrive at that level, that they don't get too caught up in, in their fame, so to speak, or their notoriety, and then, and then drive the company into the ground. They always, again, are just keeping the focus on, on the business and moving it forward. But if you could fill us in on that, I think that would be quite helpful for the listeners here.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting story. So it's never, I'm trying to think as you're talking through this, was there a day that I just woke up and realized, okay, I'm well known in the space. I'm building a name for myself. Like, when did it happen? So I'm trying to think of like how this happened. So for example, you start the business and it's just, you yourself, well, it was the two of us that was started the business and
Yeah.
sitting down and putting ideas together, start writing code, start doing things. And it's just you're working at home. You're working on a project, right? Like it's almost like you're painting a wall, right, in your
Yeah.
house. So no big deal. You're sitting down and doing your thing. Next thing you know, it's like, you know what? There's a lot of distractions in the house. I want an office, because eventually we're going to want to hire some people and we're going to want to do that.
Yeah.
Next thing you get an office, you start doing it. Next thing you know, for me, 2 years later, we outgrew the office, got a bigger office. Then we have an office that'll hold 50 people. And at this point, I'm still head down, just one of the guys, writing code and doing my thing. And then somebody walks in the office and goes, "Hey, Rich, can I introduce you to my parents?" I'm like, "Oh, sure." And then the parent, whatever the parent's name was, "Oh, by the way, this is my boss." And I go, "When did I become a boss?" Like, I never looked at it that way. I typically use team members as my term that, we're all team.
Yeah, because you felt like you were still in the trenches, right?
Yeah.
You felt, yeah,
So I just never thought of it. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, I guess I'm in charge of, 25 people, 30 people, whatever it is that we had at the time. And then it started going to trade shows. Um, and all of a sudden I'm getting recognized at trade shows, like people that I don't even know who recognize my work, recognize some of the stuff that I'm doing, and still wouldn't like kind of click. And the funny part of the story is, are you familiar with a gentleman called John Edwards? He like reads dead people.
yes, I know exactly. I remember him back then. He was on for I don't know if it was that in the '90s or early 2000s. I remember that though. I remember there was
2000s. Yeah, he
yeah
was big in
2000.
the
Yeah,
2000s, right?
yeah,
So just for fun, we decided to take a couple of us and go watch one of his shows. And we get there, and there's room for like 1,000 people, and we're packed in there. And he's just starting to read people, and all of a sudden he starts zoning in on my section of the room, and he says, "Who over this room on this side of the room is famous?" Never, I still to this day I don't consider myself famous, but he's like, "Who on this side of the room is considered famous?" And he's drilling, he's drilling, he's drilling.
yeah, yeah,
And then he says something like, "If you walked into an industry show, this is where it clicked." And he goes, "And people would recognize you." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's me." He said, "Well, that's what I'm talking about famous." I'm like, "Yeah, but my word for famous is the average person is going to recognize me on the street, whereas this is in a very small, confined
This
industry."
is in your industry. Yeah,
Right. So in my industry, I'm well known. And that's kind of when you started feeling like a little bit of fame. Like, I don't want to get out of control here, but it's
yeah.
just a little bit of fame. So now what's happened is I've been with LinkedIn probably since the beginning. Um, and it's been growing. I think I got 25,000 followers, not a huge amount, but on LinkedIn, it's a decent number.
No, that's good. I mean, that's very high. Yeah,
It's a decent number. And I post videos on a weekly basis. I post, new content on a regular basis. I'll post pictures of my grandkids. I just post just because they always say you want to have a third of business, a third on the industry, and a third
yes,
personal.
yep. I do the
So,
same thing. Yep.
yeah, so I've been doing that for a couple of years, and I'll walk in. So I'm in Bangkok, right, at a trade show in Bangkok, and we're at breakfast, and this little girl is sitting at an elevator crying, like she lost her parents. So now, look, as a parent, I'm not leaving the situation. We're going to figure out what's going on. So we're
Yeah,
trying to walk around and figure out what's going on. We call the wait staff over, like, "Oh, I think I know who she's with. Let me see if I can go find them." I peer the corner. I see somebody, and I think they kind of look a lot like maybe the same, but I don't know. Let me just double check. If not, I'll ask that individual. So it came back, and sure enough, the guy walks around and says it was his daughter. They had get him, and rather than saying thank you, he goes, "Oh." you're Richard Kahn. I know you. You're with Anura. And I'm like, how random is that? But it's interesting that yes, you're pushing out all this stuff, and in my industry, in the all the different trade shows, and I do this year, I'll do almost 20 trade shows. Out of the trade shows that I go to, I'm well known in those space. So when you get a little bit of notoriety like that, it's just, and it's never, in my opinion, it's never one day all of a sudden, boom. It may be the one day that you recognize it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Like
like
in your
anything else.
case, when you were at the John Edwards thing, you didn't even realize that that was even the case until like that was like the first, well, maybe not the first indication, but kind of solidified that hey, I am considered somewhat famous here in my industry. I'm known. People know me. People know my work.
Yeah.
They can when they see something and they say, yeah, that's Rich Kahn, in a neuro, that type of thing.
And that was just kind of interesting, like when that happened.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's a question of now what do you do with it, right? You don't take it to your head, you don't become complacent and allow it to now work against you because we've seen that happen before where people can now and now take the very entity that they built up and now and now get caught up in all that and now run it into the ground because they get caught up in other things that are really not on track with the vision of the company. What would you say would be some things that, I mean, obviously that didn't happen to you, but like you would say that if, you would give advice for someone, to make sure that things don't get to your head too much, so to speak.
Keep your head down and stay in the weeds, stay in the trenches with everybody. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you want to look at one of the most famous people, Elon Musk. What does he
Yeah.
work? I think he works like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
still in the trenches. I mean, he's got all kinds of stuff going on in his life, and all kinds of businesses, all kinds of new stuff coming out, and he can afford to do that, being what, a
Yeah.
half a trillionaire or whatever he is at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but he didn't let success get to his head. Steve Jobs, same thing, was a workaholic. These guys continued to work even though they didn't have to. They
Yeah.
were at a level in life where they could sit back and do nothing, but they chose to continue staying in the weeds. That's how you keep it from getting out of control. I think that's how, and like I said,
Well,
my,
like what you just said, that they're more than just what they do. Like Apple obviously was, had, computers and iPhones but they also created an experience, right? They had an impact on pop culture for what they did with the pop culture in itself. So they were seen as trusted advisors and they were visionaries and it was more than just what they did. I always find that the industry leaders, that really go to that, even that next level, see that like they see more than just what their company represents as a product or service or both, but more of things even outside of that impact their industry, impact society, business, whatever that may be.
well, take a look at it this way. If you turned around to the average person and said, here's $50 million, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I would say 99.99% of them are retired, traveling, spending money,
Oh yeah.
right? Why? It's more than typically it's more money than most people can spend in a lifetime, but
Exactly.
people figure out
But
a way to
still,
spend
if you give it to the wrong hands, that money. Look at some professional. Look at
it.
Warren Sapp. A guy was a multi millionaire during his playing days, and he was bankrupt at somebody. He ran to all that money.
Some people find a way to spend it, but then you look at somebody like a Jobs or a Musk, where they're worth billions, if not hundreds of billions,
Yeah,
and they don't need to work, but they still find a reason and a purpose to work.
yeah.
I
And
think
they
that,
don't necessarily, like flaunt their wealth. Like some. I mean, look at Warren Buffett. I mean, he still lives even to this day in the same house
they grew
when
up
he
in.
started. This home is like 70 years old, whatever how old it is, or 80. Yeah, and he still, some people, what was it, Sam Walton still driving a old Ford pickup truck, and Walmart was worth billions at the time. Yeah,
Yeah, look at Zuckerberg. I think the last article I read, he's got a small one-bedroom apartment across the street from
yeah,
the office.
yeah. Well, what is it? Elon Musk says that he doesn't even own a home, because home ownership is it's not an asset unless you're producing revenue from it. It's draining you got to pay more. You got to pay a mortgage. You got to pay property tax. You got to upkeep. You got to pay for upkeep of the house, the yard, and insurance. You name it. So, oh yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's reasons for it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's, again, so I see those leaders as reinvesting in themselves, their people, reinvesting into the communities they serve, maybe the industries that they're doing, nonprofits, those types of things. That again, those are things that build that trusted advisor status with the industry leaders, other industry leaders they're working with, and those are things that I've learned over the years that have sustained that level of the industry leader, so to speak. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, valuable insights there that you shared there. Any other things as we're getting, we're still got time, but as we get near the end of the show, any other things that you feel that you didn't cover that you feel are worth merit, mentioning to the audience that could really help connect the dots to what you shared here today?
One of the things I just had lunch with somebody the other day and very successful. Um, and I said something to him and I said, not for nothing. I love what I do. I love getting up. I love Monday mornings, getting up, going to the office and getting work done and working with the team. Like, you know, I just love what I do. So, and they always say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? And his mentality was pretty much the opposite. He was like, oh, as soon as I'm out of this business, I'll never think about this stuff again because it's only there for me to make money.
Yeah,
And he's crushing it, making a ton of money. But at the same token, I'd like to do that and enjoy what I do at the same time. Just something a little,
absolutely. You like you said, you spend most of besides sleeping, you spend most of your life in working. You're in a business or you're working for someone. So it's, and life is short as it is. So you might as well find something you enjoy. It doesn't have to be your ultimate dream, but as long as it's something that plays to your strengths and your skills, and it can help make an impact on other people, then so be it.
yeah,
Wow. Valuable stuff. Well, I wanted to leave the rest of this time. We have about 2.5 minutes before the end show. I want to let people know how they can find you. But before we do, I want to thank you personally, as well as the team here at Sustainable Success, for taking the time out of your busy schedule as the CEO and founder of Anura to be with us here. And I want to thank you again for taking that time.
anytime. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. I'd like to leave this now, let people know how can they find you, what are you up to, and anything you'd like to share, provide them.
Sure. I'm easy to reach. I don't hide. Rich Kahn, from Anura on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, very easy to get to. I do respond to all my messages. Probably the easiest way to get me is through email, rich@anura.io. Real easy to get me. Um, One of the resources that I like to leave people with, because we just spent so much time putting it together. We just launched it I think a week ago, maybe 2 weeks at most, is a resource called A Comprehensive Guide to Ad Fraud. I want to say it's about 60 pages long. It took us almost a year to put together. Lots of good information, facts and figures, all up to date because we just printed it. You can get it off our site. Um, it's a free download. You just go to resources, download, and you'll see the comprehensive guides, a standalone link there. And if you're interested about fraud, what you can do about it, how to identify it, all those kinds of things, whether you want to do something in-house or you want to license a company like us to do it for you, it's a great resource to download and start learning a little bit more about what's going on out there. So you're not blind to it. So if you're interested in fraud or anything like that, or just want to get your, dip your toe in the water to kind of understand it, it's the perfect resource. And we have tons of like white papers and we have a white paper that the University of Delaware wrote for us that showed how fraud from Russia disappeared 4 days after the attack
Wow. Yeah.
in Ukraine. I mean, we have all kinds of really cool stuff to look at. But to start with the first thing, I would start with this comprehensive guide because it's the
Great.
most recent thing that we wrote, and it's really good.
Beautiful. Well, we want to thank you again, and we want to encourage everybody to reach out to Rich, connect with him on LinkedIn, reach out to him on email, take advantage of that comprehensive ad fraud guide. Again, it doesn't matter if you're a startup or even if you work for somebody, it might benefit the business owner there. This is such an important area. We could have done a show just on ad fraud detection and prevention in itself. But again, we wanted to give you a wider scope of, again, what it looks like to be, go from a startup to a industry leader. Again, listeners, we want to thank you each and every week. We are committed to bringing subject matter experts like Rich in each and every week to help move you and your business to the next level. Till then, everybody, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week, same time. Take care.